Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, still doing pandemic projects. This one was sent in by John. It looks to be an oldie but a goodie. This is a South Bend 710A. This reel was made in Japan, so that generally dates it to the late 60s or 70s. It's a interesting reel. It's not a complicated reel in the sense that there's no fancy bail, trip, or release. This is what I call a hammer function. As you open up your bail and it rotates around, it just kind of slams into this bar on the handle and hammers it, and the hammer will trip the bail. So this one's very tight. I would guess that we're going to see what we saw in that other reel that John had sent me with the gladding and just a whole bunch of grease. But otherwise, I think that as long as it's turning, it usually doesn't indicate any broken parts. And we'll do our best to smooth this thing up a little bit and put it back into service. So this is a freshwater reel, and we'll start by taking off the spool. See what we got under there. And so we have a plastic spool. That generally indicates that the reel is on the value side of the equation. Looks like we have a drag washer or two in there. A little bit of dirt underneath here, which kind of says it's been sitting for some time now. Even more indicative is that we've got a lot of rust in here. So I don't know much we can do with rust, but we're going to do this. We're going to take some penetrating oil. That generally helps free up rust. And as we do some of the other work here, we're just going to kind of let that sit and do whatever it can do. And then we'll maybe use some steel wool or something to try and clean up whatever is left over. I'm going to remove the handle. The handle you remove by simply going in a counterclockwise direction. And then we're going to come over here to the case. There's 3 screws in the case, so let's take those out. And I know I always mention I try to wear a latex glove, and here's a prime example. So this stuff is starting to leak out of the bowl, and it's leaking onto my hand. And if I didn't have that latex glove on there, it'd be all over my hands and in my hand, and I would prefer to have it kind of drop onto the table like it's doing here by running off that glove. So just a word of how I do it. Doesn't mean you have to do it that way, but I try to do it that way for sure. You'll also notice that I'm using a parts tray behind me, just the bottom of a milk jug, and there's your answer here. So we've got a lot of dried grease in this one. It's slowing it down, and or no grease. So it's kind of interesting. We've got a puddle of grease here and no grease on the 2 main gears here. So that's what's kind of causing this thing to behave as it is. So how does it get like that? Well, it gets like that because the reel was stored like this. If it's stored like that, all of that grease is going to conform to what gravity does best and just kind of go to the lowest point. And that lowest point happened to be here and on the case. So that's how it gets there. It wasn't put there on purpose, but that's where it wound up. And that's very hard. That's almost, not only does it look like chocolate, it kind of feels like a hard candy, like a chocolate nugget or something there. All right, well, we can take that off. And I wish I could wear that glove on this hand, but it just doesn't work out for me. There's a pin in this one, which is going to release the shaft. And pull the pin out. That's a good reason to take the approach that I do and use a parts tray. That pin can go anywhere and it can go quickly. When you're not paying attention, you can just knock it off your table, and that's, as they used to say, all she wrote, right? All right, with the pin out, that shaft should come out then. Yep. The shaft is full of gunk and gum. You can tell why it was behaving the way it was. So let's take a piece of 4/0 steel wool. It's the finest grade made. It's not coarse at all. It's not going to scratch up much. It's going to polish, and it's going to help remove any of the junk that may be in there. Now we just got surface grease. This doesn't affect anything in the operation. It's just puddled there. But dirty grease is an enemy of fishing reels. So get it out of there. Don't let it sit, because the next thing you know, somehow it'll work its way into the mechanism, and then you'll be wondering why you didn't spend a couple extra seconds there getting it out. So do that. And then of course here's the other reason why. So that grease that puddled down, that's your crosswind bar, and that's doing its best just to jam things up. So there we go. We're in pretty good stead with that. I'm going to just hit it real quickly with that WD-40. That WD-40 is generally a good degreaser. It's not meant as, nor should it be used as your final lubrication. It's a basic one, but don't lube with the WD-40. Use the real greases like Pen Real Grease. Use the real oils like Real X, which I use, or Pen Precision Real Oil. Don't use the general purpose greases. There was rust on here. Now, there's nothing you can do about rust, and we're certainly not going to repaint this, but I am going to take that steel wall and see if I can at least get some of it off there. And if nothing else, it's just going to smooth it down. There's not much you can do. The good news, I guess, with that is the inner case rust here is just that it's inside the case. Not that this is a show quality aged reel, but you want to keep it as nice as you can. There was a lot of rust that came off there. Now we want to take this off because we want to get that main gear out. In order to get the main gear out, this has got to come off. So let's see. Okay, so this is a Mitchell tool. I've talked about it from time to time. It's a 12mm socket. It just happens a lot of the manufacturers used it. And here's an interesting point that I just noticed. So if you go to take it off, the traditional way to take off a reel is counterclockwise on the nut. In this case, I turned counterclockwise and it didn't move. So I just reversed course because some of the reels are counter-threaded. And in this case, this one was threaded to the counterclockwise direction. So in order to get it off, you have to go clockwise. All right, that should help me remove the rotor. And we'll just clean out under there. But this is what we really wanted to get to. We want to get the pinion gear out of there so that we can get the main gear out of here. Okay. This has got an interesting little anti-reverse. I was looking for a dog, and really what it is, it's just using this little counter here to run on a ramp. So you always learn something interesting, regardless of the age or the fundamental construction of the reel. There's always an interesting approach taken to some of this stuff. And I just learned another alternative here in terms of how they go about the anti-reverse function. There's just the lightest amount of grease accumulated on the back of that reel. There's a little shim washer that goes in the middle there. We're just going to inspect, which I did, all of the teeth. They are in good stead. So I'm going to put some grease onto the teeth. You don't have to get it on every one of them. It will facilitate it. And then I'm going to get grease into the center here because that crosswind block is going to ride on that. Okay, so we've laid out all the parts then, so let's go put this back together. The first part that goes back together then would be the main gear would go in. I did a little bit of greasing on the front here. Make sure we get the grease onto the back shaft. We'll put that in first. And one of the things I like to do is just put the handle right on. Sometimes easier said than done. Okay, get that handle in there because I want to make sure it's spinning free and easy. There's no sense doing that. There was a little washer you may or may not have paid attention to when you're taking it out, but there's a little washer here that goes under the pinion gear. Kind of holds that to the case. We'll put that in, make sure that that's turning smoothly. We'll come up top. There was a big washer that went over the top of that. You may not have seen that because when I took the rotor off for cleaning, it was kind of stuck there, but it's where it belongs now. There is a washer on top, so let's go ahead and put this on then. Remember that turns in reverse, or traditionally reverse. It turns the way it's designed to turn. Okay, we can do it again if we like to just convince ourselves that we've got it right. And boy, do we have a nice smooth operating reel there. All right, clean off that main shaft again. Put a little bit of grease on that. That axle shaft will go through the top. You also want to deal with the crosswind block here. You want to get grease after we've cleaned it. We want to get grease into that channel there so that operates smoothly. And if you were paying attention when we took this off initially, we had this point of the crosswind block, the little place for the pin was below. That's always a good idea to take pictures along the way, just in case you get confused and you don't realize the orientation. This one could easily be installed upside down, and what would happen is you would lose the stroke. This would bump up against the other piece. Alright, so we come through, and then I like to push it through to see that I have the orientation on the hole correctly before bringing it back. And put the pin in. You got the pin in. Make sure that we have the oscillation working right. Look at that, huh? What a difference already. Nice little reel. Okay, simple enough then. There's nothing else to be done under here. We've lubed the pinion gear, the main gear, the crosswind block. We've cleaned all the old junk out. So it's time to put the case back on, and then we'll go up quickly on that spool. There is a drag washer in there, so we'll look at the drag washers, and I suspect there's not much we can do if they're bad, but they were holding, so I don't think that we have them bad by that much. If they are, we'll do our best. Okay, there's two more in here. That's the beauty of the parts tray. You can always figure it out. So John, we're 3 for 3 on some of these older reels here. That 750 that you sent in turned out nicely. This one's going to turn out nicely. I think we also did the video on the Pfluger Akron. Turned out nicely. We didn't do a video on the Shakespeare Wonder Reel because I just completed one, and I'll post that shortly. But that's a beautiful reel from 1951. So not quite sure where you got all of these. They're all about that era in terms of 50s and 60s. So let's see what, oh, nice. Okay, here's your spool. It has a little kind of a metal washer. It has a felt washer, not unusual, and it has a hard washer below. So the hard backing washer goes in the bottom there. Nothing you do with that. Felt washers, you get oil on the felt washer. You don't put grease on there. Grease would cause it to bind and tear. And we put that little metal plate back on, and we can load your spool in there. Get the button, a little drag adjuster. Now I noticed when I was testing this before the video, I always test the reels just to make sure that I identify a weakness, or more importantly, make sure it all works. There you go. Good. Alrighty. There's our reel. And of course I said we have a bang feature here. So you're going to load your bail, and you're going to come over, and it's going to trip by hitting this little stud here. And don't think that's just a feature on a low-end reel. The Penn spin fishers, going back to the 500 series and so on, the 550s, the early Penn had that same bump feature. So it's just indicative of the time. The C series on the Daiwa Silvers, same thing. It had that a little bump guard there. So there you go. There it is. The South Bend 710A, circa 1960s. Ready to go fishing again. It's got its second chance. I hope that all of you are enjoying these pandemic projects. If you have a particular reel that you're working on and you're stuck, send me a note. I'll try to unstick you. If you have a reel that you would like to have serviced but you're not up to it, send me a note on the business card that follows, and I'll be happy to work with you to service that reel. If you are staying at home, please be safe. Stay in, stay listening. We will get through this pandemic. And to all of the first responders and those on the front lines, thank you so much for all it is that you do. So this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.